Right guys, welcome back. Hope you get a coffee. This is another long one. We're going to be talking about chords, how to build them, build them more extended chords. So we'll be looking at not just major 7s, major 9s, major 11, major 13, add 9s, add 11, add 13, sus chords, all those chords that sound like they've got crazy names, and we're going to make sense of them and work out what they are. And I want to point out now, when people talk about jazz chords, there are no such thing as jazz chords, there are just chords. Earlier on, we looked at the A major scale and we harmonised 4 notes and we created A major 7. So we had A, C sharp, E and G sharp. So those 4 notes together created A major 7. We've already seen that if we stick these 4 notes together, so we're still talking about the root 3rd, 5th and 7th, A, C sharp, E and G sharp, that we get A major 7. So if you've been following along closely, you'll have noticed that we've harmonised every mode of the major scale now and created a chord from it. So you should have 7 7th chords. In this key, we should have A major 7, B minor 7, C sharp minor 7, D major 7, E 7, F sharp minor 7, and G sharp minor 7 flat 5, which is also known as a half diminished chord. What I'd like to look at now is taking the A major chord and adding more notes into it, and how we can do this. So we already know that if we play the 1st, the major 3rd, the perfect 5th and the major 7th of A major, it gives us A major 7th. But what if we want to play more dense chords? You've probably seen chords like A major 9, A major 13, a lot of these chords around, and you're probably wondering, well, how do we create these? Well, simply, when you consider the scale and continue from beyond the root into the 2nd octave, what we can do is we can use these additional notes and add them into the chords. If we continue up the major scale in thirds, we have the 1st, the root, the major 3rd, then 3 notes away from that, the perfect 5th, 3 notes away from that, the major 7th. What happens if we go 3 notes above the major 7th? So in A major 7, this is G sharp. When we go 3 notes above G sharp, it takes us to B. Now B is the major 2nd or 9th of A major. So we can add B into our major 7 chord, and this will give us A major 9. One of the problems we face as guitar players is we're limited to the amount of notes we can play due to the fact that we only have 4 fingers available to us. The number of notes we can play at any given time is reduced to the amount of strings we have, 6, and the amount of fingers we have, 4. So it's very difficult for us to do something similar to a piano player where they can play a massive, dense 10-finger chord, outline and every note that they want. We're limited to what we can do. So to play an A major 9, I would say from an A string root, in this chord form, we've actually dropped the 5th out of the chord. We're only playing the root, the A, the 3rd, the major 3rd, C sharp, G sharp, the major 7, and B, which is the 9th. And you're probably wondering why we've dropped the 5th out. Well, this is what's commonly known as a shell voicing, and these are really well known in jazz and fusion circles. And because the 5th has no harmonic information that we're adding to the chord, it's a perfect interval, it's consonant, it doesn't really add anything to that chord, so we can drop it. In the same way you can with a 4th. If the chord contains a 4th, your brain's automatically filling that piece of information in for you. If we were to try and play a major 9 chord, using all of the notes available to us, there's our root, our major 3rd, our perfect 5th, our major 7th, and the open B string is the 9th, it's just not happening. So what we have to do is make some sacrifices, and in this instance we sacrifice the 5th and use a shell voicing. This is quite common, and don't be afraid of taking the 5th out of the chord. It's quite a common practice. The chord sounds the same with the 5th or without the 5th. So you'll notice with higher extension chords, 9ths, 11ths, 13ths, we do tend to have to sacrifice some notes. The 5th can be sacrificed, and if you're in a band situation, you'll find that you'll often sacrifice the root because the bass player or a keyboard player will be able to hold this down for you. So you don't necessarily need to play this as part of your chord or your shape, because someone else can help with this voicing. So it's important to notice that when we played this chord, we had the root, the major 3rd, the major 7th, and the 9th in this chord. The reason we still have the major 7th is because it's got the tension and the dissonance between the root, as it's only a semitone away. If you look at G sharp is only a semitone away from A. So that gives us a nice dissonance between G sharp and A, which is the root note. If we take this out the chord and bring the 5th back in, this gives us an maj9, which is an entirely different type of chord. So to take our standard A major chord shape that we're all familiar with, one of the basic chord shapes, and we just add the 9th to this, so we're adding B to it. It's a very different sound than if we had the G sharp over the top. So now you can subtly hear the difference between an A major 9 and an A add 9 chord. So if you don't have the 7th, it's regarded as an add 9 chord. But if you do have the 7th, it's regarded as a major 9 chord. This is the same for 11ths and 13ths. So the 7th is quite an important interval in this situation, because you need that in for it to become a major 9 chord. Otherwise you just have an add 9 chord. You can see in the chord structure what we have. You have the open A string as your root. On the D string, you have the 5th, the perfect 5th, which is the 2nd fret E note. You have the 9th, which is the 4th fret on the G string. You have the C sharp, which is the major 3rd on the 2nd fret of the B string. And in the add 9 chord, you have the open E. But when we play a major 9, we substitute that high E for a G sharp, which is the major 7th. Hopefully you can hear the subtle difference between these two chord types, and it's important to notice that they are very different. And we've achieved this just by stacking thirds on top of each other. So we have A, which is our root, C sharp, which is our 3rd, E, which is our perfect 5th, G sharp, which is our major 7th, and B, which is our 9th. Now we've stacked these on top of each other and created a 5-note chord, A major 9. So something else we can do, if we've got a chord, like an A major chord, and we decide that we want to replace the 3rd, so in our case C sharp, with the 9th, B, this gives us a sus2, so you've probably seen this chord shape before. That's a really common chord that a lot of people have seen before in open chords. It's used a lot. So that's A sus2. And it sounds like it's a crazy name, suspended second. What does that even mean? And basically all we're doing is taking the 3rd out and replacing it with the 2nd, and that's what it is. It's a suspended second. Now, even though this is technically the 9th, the B, the major 2nd, the reason it's not A add 9 or A major 9 is because there's no 3rd or no 7th in this chord. When we look at what notes we're actually playing, we're playing the root, the A, on the open A string, the 5th, the 2nd fret of the D string, we're playing A, an octave of A on the G string, the 2nd fret, the open B string, which would be your 2nd, and E, which would be the 5th. So when we talk about suspended chords, what we're talking about is a chord that has no 3rd in. Now you've probably seen suspended 2nd and suspended 4th. These can often be written as A sus2 or A sus4. That was an A sus4, so a suspended 4th. So all we're doing is suspending the 4th note over the root with no 3rd. That would be D in this instance, because we've got A, B, C sharp and D. So our 2 suspended chords, sus2 and sus4. So now we understand how to create chords by stacking thirds. We can continue down this path and we can add the 11th in. So we can create an A major 11 by continuing up the scale. So if we consider that A, 1, B, 2, C sharp, 3, D, 4, E, 5, F sharp, 6, G sharp, 7, and then we're back to 1 again. This is classed as 8. The 2nd is 9th. The 3rd we'll still refer to as the 3rd. And the 4th we'll class as the 11th. So all we do is continue from our 9th, B, 1, 2, 3, to get us to our 4th, which is D. Now, in A major, I would probably not advise to do an A major 11 chord, because the 11th, the D, clashes quite heavily with the C sharp, with it only being a semitone away, and it's quite unpleasant. We'll come back to this point later on, as you're more likely to see an A major sharp 11 chord, as this is far more pleasing to the ear due to the interval spacing. Just to demonstrate in practice, using this chord shape, I have a root, the major 7th, the major 3rd, and I've dropped the 9th and I've put the 11th in, which is the D on the 3rd fret of the B string. So this would be what an A major 11 sounds like. It's not terrible, and it does have its uses, but it's not the most pleasant chord in the world. And so when you play in the major scale, the D, or the 4th note, is usually avoided, as it's very clashy and has a lot of tension with the 3rd, with it being so close. So moving on from this, we already know that we can create an A major chord, an A major 7, an A major 9, an A major 11, and now we're going to create an A major 13 by stacking another 3rd on top of this. So we already know that D is the 11th. So if we go 3 notes up in our scale from D, D, E, F sharp, and add F sharp, which is also our 6th, but in this instance we'll class it as the 13th because we're putting it in an octave higher, we're going to create an A major 13 chord. Now I'm going to use a typical shell voicing shape. Dropping my 2nd finger, which would have been the 5th, and I'm going to replace this with the 13th, the F sharp, on the 7th fret of the B string. This gives us an A major 13 chord. The difference between this and an A major 6 chord is the major 7th. If you have a major chord with the 7th in and you add the 6th, this becomes an A major 13 chord. If you don't have the 7th, it just becomes A major 6. So in the same way when you're playing a major 9th, if you remove the 7th, it becomes A add 9, but if you add the 7th, it becomes A major 9. It's an important note in the chord. So now we understand different chord forms created from thirds, stacked thirds. We understand suspended chords, suspended seconds, and suspended fourths. There are a couple of other chords that you'll often see, like 6-9, and that's where you have no 7th, but you do have the 6, and you do have the 9th in at the same time. In this instance, we're playing a major triad, A, C sharp, and E, and we're adding the 6th in above it, F sharp, but we're also adding the 9th, B. But as there's no 7th, We're not classing these as a major 9 or a major 13. Both of these notes act together as A6-9. So now we've touched on building chords, it's important to note that this is applicable to all chord types. So although we've based this in A, you could do this in any key. So now that you have the information to build an A major 9 or an A major 13, you could use this similarly to build E major 9 or E major 13 or C major 9. Any key this is applicable to. You can also do this for every mode of the major scale as well. So we could do this in Dorian, and we could take the 7th and build ourselves a B minor 7. We could take the 11th and build a B minor 11. We could take the 13th and build B minor 13. And that's the only time we ever really have a true minor 13, is because it has a major 6th. So that's the only chord we can do that with. But again, you can do this with every mode. Hopefully now you've got an understanding of how we build chords by stacking thirds on top of each other. We now understand how we create a major 7th chord by stacking the root, the major 3rd, the perfect 5th, and the major 7th on top of each other. And that all of these notes are a third away from each other. So 3 notes in the scale away from each other. So the distance between A to C sharp is 3 notes. The distance between C sharp to E is 3 notes. The distance between E to G sharp is 3 notes. And this also applies to 9ths, 11ths and 13ths. So higher extensions of the chord, we can create major 9ths, major 11ths and major 13ths. And hopefully you've been able to walk away from this understanding that if we take the major 7 out of a major chord and add the 9th, 11th or 13th to it, it becomes an add 9, an add 11 or an add 13, because the major 7 isn't there with the harmonic information. You should also be able to identify that if there's no 3rd in the chord, but you do have a 2nd or a 4th present, this becomes a suspended chord. Thanks for following along, guys. Hopefully now you understand how to create extended chords with 9ths, 11ths, 13ths, suspended 2nds, suspended 4ths, and maybe even 6-9 chords. I'll catch you in the next lessons.